Thank you for having me, Taglay.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. This is something that has been long in the plan, and although we have met a lot in other platforms, this is your first time on Tagat. I suppose there might be some people who don't know you. Alemayehu is a PhD fellow at Indiana University. He focuses on constitutional democracy, and he will help us understand the Ethiopian Constitution today. That is what we will mainly talk about. But maybe we'll talk about that towards the end, Alemayehu. And I think it would be more proper if we begin with your take on the Ethiopian election, the alleged election. What did you make of it? How did you understand it?
Taglay, this election is a very interesting development in Ethiopian politics, and we are at a very interesting juncture in the history of Ethiopia. I would say like we are at crossroads, and the reason why I say that is because this is an election that excluded Tigray for the second time straight in a row, and there is no telling if Tigray is going to be brought back into the fold of the federation anytime soon. So honestly, it's so disheartening. So it's so heart-wrenching to see this election take place without Tigray, and of course, a lot of other places were also excluded. A lot of places in Oromia, a lot of places in Amhara. According to the NEBE, the National Electoral Board of Ethiopia, 143 polling stations weren't open. They didn't open on polling day. That's on top of a number of polling stations that didn't open due to insecurity in those parts of Amhara and Oromia. So it and so I would begin with a simple distinction. You know, I mean, it's commonplace in political science to talk about two types of elections, like sham elections and clean elections. And the reason why you conduct elections is because that's the cornerstone of democracy. The consent of the governed is what lends a government its legitimacy. So you conduct a sham election just for the sake of its exercise. But if you read too much into the result of a sham election to claim democratic authorization, to claim a democratic mandate, to do whatever you want to do, even to wage war, all right, to go after your so-called enemies with the state's coercive mechanisms. That's too much. You are reading too much into it. So that's exactly what's taking place in Ethiopia. Let's begin with the numbers. NEBE says it registered about 54 million people. And if you carefully look at that number, there is something wrong with it. If you go by the way, the last census, you need to have, according to Article 103 of the Ethiopian Constitution, Ethiopia needs to conduct census decennially, every 10 years. The reason is to ensure representation, to make sure that one person, one vote on that principle that you are running this election on that principle. So the last time that Ethiopia conducted census was back in 2007. All right. Even the first elections in 1995, since the constitutional dispensation was adopted in 1995, even that the constituencies were drawn on the basis of the 1987 census conducted during the Turk.
Is that 1987 Ethiopian calendar, right?
Yeah. No.
So 1995 then.
Yes.
All right.
Now that was during the Turk. So
Okay.
yeah. So the official status, if you want to, where do you go to look for authoritative data in Ethiopia? Yeah. I mean, you don't look at it's you don't look at like the World Bank or the IMF or something. Like, you go to the Central Statistical Authority. Yeah. That's the most authoritative source of data in Ethiopia. And according to CSA, the projected population for Ethiopia for this year is between 111 and 112 million people. So 54 million registered voters means that all that's like half of the total population by CSA counts. Then that means that Ethiopia is a heavily use dependent population. That's like close to 100% of the voting age population has been registered. So that's really laughable. That's laughable. And they are saying,
that's interesting, Alemayehu, because what percentage of the Ethiopian population is under 18? Because 18 is the minimum age for voting, right?
Half the population.
Yeah.
So it's like 100% of the voting age population has been registered.
Yeah, I think if you break down the numbers, it doesn't quite add up then.
It doesn't add up.
Yeah.
It doesn't add up. So look at the numbers. Look at the numbers. They don't add up. And the turnout itself was what? The NEB says like close to 40 or more than 40 million people went out and casted their ballots. So that's highly unlikely, So this doesn't take into account Tigray, those places in Amhara, those places where you have insecurity in Amhara and Oromia. So where are they bringing those numbers from?
Yeah, so that is roughly 7-8 million people in Tigray.
Yeah.
And then you have large areas in Amhara where election wasn't conducted because of security reasons.
Yeah.
And the same applies to, I think, significant sections in Oromia as well and in other places. So if you break down the numbers that way, the notion that 54 million people registered to vote is a bit of a joke. But I get your point.
So the first thing is like, I want to call into question the voter register itself. Then the environment in which the voting took place. Even according to NAB, what was the title of the commissioner or the board chair, the chairwoman? She admitted a lot of irregularities that took place on election day. Plain clothes security personnel were seen close to the voting
polling stations.
Polling stations. So people were voting in circumstances under which you cannot say they were free of fear or intimidation or threat. Journalists who were given accreditation by NABE itself weren't allowed. They were asked to produce additional letters, additional documentation to be able to observe the conduct of the election. And even before that, there were a lot of international media, stringers, correspondents based in Addis lost their accreditations. Reuters, Addis Standard. So you have domestic and international media that weren't accredited to observe. So that was also part of the environment under which that election took place. So so now let's move on to the most important part of the analysis, which is the results. Since yesterday, the chairwoman was giving a press statement, and I was following that. And well, we knew the result before the votes were cast, that the Prosperity Party would come out as the winner. So they have already. So she was saying in those districts from which the results have already have already come in. Prosperity has won in all except in one. That was in Gondar. A representative from the National Amhara, what's that? The NAMA, the Amhara movement, Abin Nama, won, and even Prosperity didn't field a candidate there. So the result is going to be 100%, close to 100% win at the end of the day. And today she has continued to give another pressure. So now the most important question is, how is Abiy Ahmed going to read the results? That's the most important part. If he's going to read the results triumphantly, right? A triumphalist reading of the results would already a man that has waged a bloody war, a genocidal war in Tigray, and has also engaged in extensive counterinsurgency operations in Amhara against the Fano, and in Oromia against the OLA. If he reads that the result is triumphantly, then what this means is that he will intensify his campaigns against those movements in those parts of the country, and he will also launch a renewed offensive against the TPLF in Tigray. So the future is so grim, it's so dark. But if he can humble himself and read the results with humility required of a statesman, then he will impose that would impose limitations on him in the actions that he might be contemplating to take. Then he might be open to mediation and negotiations. He might opt for a peaceful way to resolve those conflicts. So that's the most important part. So anything else? Do you have any specific questions for me about the elections?
Yeah. I mean, you say that um, you ask how he might read the so-called results, and you say that there is a possibility he might read them with humility, and that might lead him to some constructive actions. But the idea of Abiy Ahmed and humility is a bit of an oxymoron for me. I mean, we know him now enough to know that he wouldn't do that. He is going to probably say, I now have a mandate, and that means I'm going to go around and crush opposition and armed insurgencies and all that, and that might lead to more instability and more war in Ethiopia. That is my fear. But maybe one counterbalance to that is, as you say, universally, the election has been described as a sham in the international media. And one reading of that is that it is a reflection of how Western governments, his backers, have seen the election. And they might put pressure on him to read the results with humility. So not out of his own volition, but he might be forced to read the results in a certain way. But I don't know if that is a possibility. If you see that as a possibility, if Western pressure might nudge him in a certain direction, is that a distinct possibility that you see?
Today, I was on social media, and like Ethiopian state broadcasters or state affiliated broadcasters like Fana were live. They were broadcasting live. The Prime Minister, the Chief of Staff, General Brahanu Jula, talking about Samdo and how treasonous parties, groups, factions have been conspiring to subvert Ethiopia's sovereignty. So they have already started the rhetoric that they are already beating the drums of the war. All right. So and even 2 days ago, you remember the drone strikes in Shiraro. So it didn't take him long for Abiy. He was just waiting until the elections were over. He didn't even wait until NABE declared the results of the election. So my fear is that the results of the election would embolden him. That's my fear. It would embolden him, and he will engage in. He will mount those offensive operations in Tigray very soon. Yeah, very soon. That's why the international community needs to be alert, needs to watch this thing carefully.
Yeah, I mean the irony in that state broadcast you mentioned, Alemayehu, is that he was saying that the TPLF and other forces have historically colluded with what they call historical enemies like Egypt, and that they have always tried to prevent Ethiopia from doing important projects such as the Grand Renaissance Dam, forgetting completely that it was under the TPLF, under Meles Zenawi, that Ethiopia started the project. It was Meles Zenawi who created the diplomatic condition for Ethiopia to be in a position to begin the project. So I mean, at one level, it's completely delusional what he was saying, but the irony simply wouldn't occur to him. So it's hilarious in a way. But coming to the election, I mean, I always hear, I don't know if you follow our programs, but I like to give a charitable interpretation of what they may say. What, for instance, Abiy Ahmed, if he were here, might say, for instance, he would say, well, in terms of elections in Tigray and in Amhara and in the other areas that that wasn't possible to hold elections, it was because of the guerrilla insurgents and all that, and that it's not my fault. And as soon as the security condition allows, we're going to hold elections in those areas. And therefore, that Abiy Ahmed is not to blame. That is what you would say, right? And that indeed that's what they are saying. That as soon as the conditions improve in those areas, we're going to hold elections, and therefore that it shouldn't be seen as a slight to the integrity and fairness and democratic nature of the elections. That is what the official line is from Ethiopia.
Yes. By the way, I just wanted to say something that that relates to this, and is also provoked by my appearance a couple of days ago uh, on a South African media, the South African Broadcasting Corporation, and I was asked this question. I mean, that question, the question itself wasn't fair. I mean, I just realized like that wasn't fair after like it was a very short appearance, and I realized that it wasn't the question itself wasn't fair, and it didn't even do justice to me as a guest. Uh, the question they asked me was, Tigray was excluded from the elections because TPLF is engaged in forced conscription of the youth. Now, this wasn't even an allegation made by the federal government. There was no statement that can be imputed to the NEB to this effect. The reason why the elections didn't take place in Tigray is because NEB registered TPLF last year in May. My hope was that that administrative measure was temporary to bring TPLF to up to speed, to comply with the political parties registration statute. But as you know, TPLF splintered into two factions. Even the other faction, led by Getachew Reda, instead of the expectation was that he would succeed. He would inherit the TPLF, but instead he chose to establish a brand new party, Simrat. Now there is no dispute as to who's going to be the real successor of the TPLF between the two factions. You know, we have already stopped even referring to that faction, this faction, like they are already Simrat. They are not TPLF Getachew or TPLF Debretsion. There is only one TPLF. So TPLF is the signer of is the party to the Pretoria Agreement. You cannot just legislate the TPLF out of existence. You cannot wish it away. You know, you have to engage. You have to continue to engage TPLF if you really care about the nation's unity, the country's unity, right? About its territorial integrity, right? If you want, as the federal government, look, the federal government in federations we have two levels of governments: the federal government and the state government. But as a federal government, we are a government of the nation. That's the state, the body politic, Ethiopia. So it means that you show some concern about the territorial integrity of that country, about its unity. But the measures, what we can tell from the measures that Abiy has been taking, or from his action or inaction, or from the measures that he's not taking, you can safely say that this man doesn't really care about Ethiopia's unity. He doesn't care about Ethiopia's territorial integrity. He only engages in rhetoric about Ethiopia's long past, glorious past, when Ethiopia when Ethiopia had naval forces, or when Ethiopia used to have access to the Red Sea and stuff. But this is a federal government that doesn't even have a brigade, boots anywhere in Tigray. According to Pretoria, restoration of federal authority in Tigray and the reinstatement of Tigray's representation in the federal government, in the two houses, was one of the requirements of that agreement. So if election was to be held in Tigray, so the election didn't take. The reason the elections didn't take place in Tigray is not because TPLF is engaged in forced conscription they use, but because the federal government chose to disengage Tigray, chose to deregister TPLF. So it was just a deliberate action. Did they announce a timetable as to when the elections are going to be held in Tigray? No. Do they have any plans? No, we don't know anything about them. So is Tigray part of Ethiopia? I don't think so. So it's like he wants us to make it look like the only option he has, the only option Ethiopians are left with is war. I mean, Dergo tried this for 17 years. Even for more than 17 years, he was fighting the Eritrean rebels. Yeah, he couldn't. You can fight another 17 years with PLF. You can't bring back Tigray by force. The only way you can bring back Tigray is through peaceful means. So my fear is that the federal government is just squandering the opportunities for peaceful engagement. And the one thing that really exacerbates me is that the folks that we trusted with reforming the TPLF and democratizing Tigray are now the gatekeepers at Arat Kilo. That no negotiation, no talks take place between Prosperity Party and TPLF.
Well, you say they are the gatekeepers now in Addis Ababa, but what they would say, and you know this, is that they try to bring about reform in Tigray. They try to modernize Tigray politics. They try to move Tigray on from the CPLF era politics, but that because the bureaucracy in Tigray is controlled by the hardliners, as they call them, by the Debrecyans, that they were not allowed to do anything meaningful in Tigray, and that eventually a coup was executed against them, which is why now they are in Addis trying to find other ways of getting back into Tigray politics. That is what they would say. So if you would like to reflect on that, because that is one of the bones of contention in Tigray politics. People like you and people like me say that they, as you say, they squandered a wonderful opportunity to transform Tigray politics, to bring about meaningful reform. But they would say that they were denied the opportunity to do that by the establishment in Tigray.
Yeah. What was the faction that turned out to be Simrat supposed to do? For me, what Getachew was supposed to do? I really don't want to like drop names, honestly, but sometimes you can dispense with that, and I have to. Getachew just wasted the greatest opportunity to reform Tigray. He had some 16 or some 16 central committee members that followed him. Yeah, that walked out of that Congress or something, or were they? They were with him. Now I don't know where they are. I don't know where they are. He had thousands of followers. What Getachew was supposed to do now, I mean, they want to make it look like, oh, you are saying like he was supposed to stay there and get killed, assassinated. Why status already not killed or assassinated? He stood his ground. He's there.
But
if you
isn't he a dead man walking now? Nobody has heard from Tadesse for the past one month since Debrecen returned to his presidency. And what people like Getachew and his supporters, what they would say is that Getachew is in a much better position personally or politically than Tadesse, who has simply gone into oblivion.
Well, he could have resigned. All right, they made it impossible for him to do his job. Yeah. Then if they made it impossible for you to do your job, you resign. That's the option. And besides that, his term already expired. By the way, his term expired while he was. It was at the end of his term that Abiy appointed Tadesse. The most plausible thing for Getachew to do was to resign and to decline any public office from the federal government, because that compromises his position as leader of an opposition party. You cannot claim to be a leader of an opposition party, a Tigrayan opposition party, and serve Prosperity Party. I mean, at least if he accepted the appointment after he established Simrat, for instance, you can say like, okay, now Simrat has a representation in the federal government. Understand? I mean, just honestly, I just can't wrap my head around this.
I hear you. In the I don't know if you watch the car crash Al Jazeera interview with Mehdi Hassan that he did. He was at pains to make the point that he was only an advisor to the prime minister, that he is otherwise not a member of the Prosperity Party, and that he has nothing to do with the Prosperity Party, and that he shouldn't be described as a member or as someone who might subscribe to the philosophies, if you can use that word, with Abiy Ahmed's party, and therefore that we shouldn't say he is serving the prime minister, or that he is serving, or that he's a member of the Prosperity Party. So he would take exception to that characterization, I suppose.
He's not only advisor to the prime minister, but he's also his social media activist. I mean, the tragic, it's just so tragic, to see Getachew like, sharing and resharing like the prime minister's posts or the Prosperity Party's posts on Facebook. How can you reduce yourself to this level? I mean, Getachew is a genius, I trust Getachew. Now what are they doing? I mean, the entire gang. What are they doing in Addis? They are just pleading Abiy day in, day out to intervene in Tigray militarily. I saw him on one of the meetings. Is that on one of their meetings in Addis, asking that he doesn't care if Abiy conducts drone strikes at the meeting halls. I mean, it was Getachew who told us that he lost a couple of his security details to drone attacks. That drone attacks are indiscriminate. There is no other witness. No, there is no better witness than Getachew himself to this fact. So I really don't understand what the gang in Addis is doing. I mean, it's up to you. I mean, you make a decision. You make a decision. Yeah, you want to lead a struggle. Yeah, then you lead the struggle. You want to opt out? You are free to do that. Sarkan told us what? He was scared. He was scared of assassination by the EPLF operatives in Addis. Then, very recently, I heard that I heard him saying that when the TPLF started shuttling with the PFDJ again, that he was scared. He can make a choice. I mean, he spends a lot of time in Washington D.C. He can choose to live in Washington D.C. I mean, he doesn't have to run between Mekelle and Addis. I mean, it's up to you. You choose the struggle. Then it's up to you. I choose to be in graduate. I choose to be in graduate school, and I'm in graduate school.
Yeah, I mean, yes, to a degree, you are responsible for your own circumstances, right? You can't say that you are a product of external events, because that would mean that you're completely impotent. But that seems to be the position that people like Getachew has taken. And I think it's interesting that you mentioned what he said at that meeting, that offhand comment he made, that he wouldn't be minded if Abiy conducted some sort of precision strike, given that he knows what precision strike means in the context of Ethiopia, given that he knows young people who were protecting him during the war were struck, and he, as a matter of, as luck would have it, escaped. And he owes his life to luck as much as to anything else. And for somebody who has gone through that horrible experience, to then plea with the prime minister, with Abiy Ahmed. I detest the word prime minister. To conduct a precision strike in Tigray is beyond parody for me. But one thing that I should mention here is that it is something that has a lot of traction among the Tigrayan elite, especially among those residing in Addis now. You hear that everywhere. People pushing for Abiy Ahmed to militarily remove the TPLF and replace them by the people in Addis.
Yeah.
So it is not something that you should only attribute to Getachew Reda. It is something that has a lot of subscribers, and it is a serious problem to me. I find it extraordinary that people should believe precision strike or drone strike would be a solution to the political problems in Tigray. But some people have contrived to believe that, and you hear that everywhere today. So I think it would be good if you could reflect on that, why we ended up here.
So the key to resolving this conflict, and the only modality for engagement that we have, is the Pretoria Agreement. You know, I have always been saying this. It takes a modicum of madness to sign the Pretoria Agreement, and it took one. That was Getachew. I was careful about my characterization of that agreement. The night the night the night that agreement was signed, I posted on Facebook. It's still there. There is this Israeli philosopher Avishai Margarit has a book called Rotten Compromise. Compromise is not something you are supposed to do normally, under normal circumstances, because there is this thing that we call principle. You are supposed to act on principle. But in extraordinary circumstances, as war, stopping war, might require you to compromise. But what kind of war? And what's the goal, the objective that you want to achieve through that kind of compromise? If the aim is to stop mayhem, to stop bloodletting, to stop crimes against humanity, which were really being perpetrated against Tigrayans at that time, you have the excuse to do that. That was the only way I can wrap my head around that agreement. If it can't, it's a rotten compromise. And TPLF, to imagine TPLF to do something like that, honestly, I can't. This is an EPRF, and TPLF. To dissolve a government you fought for. How did the war broke out? Huh? How did it break out? How did it start? Those constitutional disputes as to whether Tigray is allowed to hold elections. Tigray defied the federal constitution, because the constitution is what the constitutional interpreter says it is. That's the House of Federation. It said you can't. It's unconstitutional. But they defied and they went ahead. Yeah, they conducted the elections. I was an election observer in Workamba, in Adha. But to agree to dissolve that government, like that's the reason d'etre. The very reason you fought for. Now, the thing I'm saying is, does Getachew care about his legacy? Does he want to leave a legacy? I want to believe he wants. He must work for the success of the Pretoria Agreement. The success of Pretoria Agreement is Getachew's success. That's his legacy. That's his life's work, his life's project. Getachew is going to remember for this, for nothing else. Even now, that's what he should be doing. Not serving as a gatekeeper. Not to allow anyone from the TPLF to go to see the Prime Minister. He should be the one facilitating this. he should be the one pressing the federal government to give the TPLF its accreditation as a party, to talk to the NEBE to schedule an election in which his own party also takes place. So, so the faction in Addis has to come to its own senses. They have to come to their senses. All right, they're saying what? They're saying bring down the TPLF by any means. That's what they are doing. And they give you like silly rallying cries, silly agenda, so mediocre, so stupid, to detract you from the main issues that every Tigrayan needs to be concerned with.
Well, they are open about what they want. They seem to be saying that a military takeover of Tigray is the best solution. So if you listen to Getachew, if you listen to Tzadkan, if you listen to the people around them, if you listen to the people, I think now they have created this umbrella organization called Dereti Salam or something, right? What they say is that they want Abiy Ahmed to go in and militarily remove the TPLF and install them as an interim administration, and then for Tigray to push for an election on all the jazz that comes after that. So that is what they are saying, and that they are very, very open about that, and they don't seem to be to care about the Pretoria Agreement. I mean, you make a very important point that Getachew should have been the primary guardian of the Pretoria Agreement, because as he told us when he signed it, he was forced to sign it because he wanted to stop the killing fields in Tigray. That was the primary reason why he signed an agreement that was otherwise heavily skewed against Tigray, right? There is a consensus about that they agreed to dissolve a government, which was the raison d'etre, they say, for the whole thing, right? But people accepted the agreement reluctantly because people were made to believe that the reason was because it was a reflection of the military dynamic that existed then, and that they had to do everything and anything to stop the killing in Tigray. And I think people had a degree of respect for that. But now they have veered off completely from that. Now they don't seem to care about the Pretoria Agreement. They didn't seem, for instance, when Abiy, in breach of the Pretoria Agreement, appointed Tadesse as president, as a puppet, I should say, which was the primary trigger for the TPLF to do what they then did to oust Tadesse. You would have thought people like Erkan and Getachew would be the first ones to come out and say, no, we shouldn't breach the Pretoria Agreement in this way. Whatever appointments we do in Tigray, and everything should be in accordance with the Pretoria Agreement. But they didn't do that. So something seems to have gone awry when it comes to people like Tzadkan and Getachew and the people around them. And I don't understand for the life of me. I don't know if you have some insight into that. I think that is something that people want to understand. But that something has gone clearly wrong is very, very obvious to see.
Yeah, I mean, these people are like, these are very intelligent people. We're talking about very intelligent people. Tzadkan and Getachew. I wish we were talking about some mediocre, no IQ folks like Abiy himself. But we're talking about highly intelligent people, very, very smart people. Tzadkan, there is this paper that Tzadkan gave at the symposium on the making of the Ethiopian Constitution back in 1993. And that was a fantastic paper. It was about the role of the military, how to build a people's military. And he really fascinated a lot of people, like another person that gave a paper on the same topic was a Harvard professor, Elaine Scarry. Elaine, I was in correspondence with Elaine when Andreas Shetty passed away for the obits I was writing for my journal Africa Today, and she went back reminiscing about her experience of that. I had two people telling me about what goes on in the halls of the ECA in that moment, that founding moment of the Ethiopian Constitution, the second Ethiopian Republic. Okay, the other was Stanford University philosopher. Then he was at MIT, a prominent philosopher, Joshua Cohen. And you know, another guy, Sarkan's paper also interested picked an interest in another person. That was Samuel Huntington. so we are talking about very, very smart, very intelligent people. They know what they are doing, but they are driven by what? They are driven by vengeance. All they want is just revenge the TPLF for what they did to them. But that's not the way to go. They need to stop and think. That's not the legacy they want to leave. They are misreading history. Now the question is, are they deliberately misreading history? You can't succeed at this. It's a misadventure to try to bring down the TPLF by force. No, you can't. I mean, you can control Addis. They can disperse into the woods, into the mountains of Tigray. But it will take years. You can't rule Tigray that way. And times have changed now. This is not only going to be a war between the federal government and Tigray. No, it's not. Now it's becoming a regional war. The Sudan conflict. It's always I don't really understand why the Sudan conflict started about the same time the federal government started its operations in Tigray. Then Sudan blocked Tigrayan forces, and they cut off their logistics routes through Sudan. Yeah, but this is not the Sudan that was during the first war. Now both sides have their own alliances. They have made their own choices. The federal government is supporting the rebels, the RSF. And TPLF seems to be working with other, is engaging the other, the SAF, the Sudanese armed forces. And bring in Eritrea into the, right? Bring in others. Now, you want to pontificate about, no, these people are, they have this favorite word that they throw at each other, like the banda, yeah?
So the word for one another.
Yeah.
So the word they use for one another, so the Debrecen group use banda.
So they say banda. It was Abiy Ahmed that brought in Eritrea. And he hasn't told Eritrea to leave Tigrayan soils.
Yeah.
All right? And to talk about treason, ask Brahanu Naga what it means to be working with foreign enemies to bring down your own government. Right?
Yeah.
His own favorite people, Abiy's favorite people. The Minister of Education. All right? So I'm not gonna pontificate about this. the self-righteous, accusations that they saw at their enemies.
Yeah, well, Tigrayan political discourse is deranged, is riddled with hypocrisy, with irony, with outright stupidity, and all that. And maybe I don't know how we ended up in the weeds of Tigrayan politics, because that wasn't in the agenda. I thought we would begin with election and then proceed to other topics. But I think it's interesting topic anyway. So while we're at it, just one more issue. One thing that you hear today is that the Tigrayans who are, by and large, aligned with Abiy, seem to be pushing for military intervention in Tigray, which is why they say the thing that we have been talking about. And at the same time, they seem to be surprised by how the TPLF is supposedly reacting to it by conscripting young people and by preparing for war and all that. Of course, if you are telling or begging the Abiy regime to intervene militarily in Tigray, the TPLF is going to react in certain ways. Why does that come as a surprise? That is, I find that so bizarre that I can't get my head around.
Yeah. I mean, you are telling them that we are coming after you, right? We are telling them that they are going to roll their tanks to Tigray, and you are showing them your force, right? Your might, your military might. So what do you expect them to do? What's Oromia doing? By the way, there is no region that's far more armed than Oromia in Tigray, than Tigray, in Ethiopia. What are they doing? Forced conscription was like, was the norm. It has always been the norm in Ethiopia. Even if it was a violation of the law. I was conscripted by force. Honestly, I don't want to go into this kind of stuff. They were doing this, yeah, when the people in Addis, when they were in Magala, they were doing that, yeah. Now, what I want to see them do is press for negotiations, press for ending the road to war, preventing this war. That's what they should be talking about. Not about, no youth should be expendable. I agree with what they are saying, but you should give the youth an option. You should give them an option, a choice, a true choice, a meaningful choice. But I don't see they are left with any, though, with whatever the federal government is doing.
What you wondered aloud earlier whether Tigray was a part of Ethiopia today, and indeed the only thread that was connecting Tigray to Ethiopia, I think many people would agree, was the Pretoria agreement. But now both parties seem happy to say that the Pretoria agreement is finished, it's dead. So I wonder if there is a possibility or even a probability that, high probability that the Pretoria agreement could be brought back to life, or if it is dead.
It can be. It can be if there is genuine concern. If there is genuine concern for keeping the unity of the country, for keeping peace in the country, all right. Honestly speaking, but I don't believe there is. Abiy Ahmed is not interested. Abiy Ahmed, the only thing Abiy Ahmed is interested in is power. And whatever is left for him to rule, he's happy with that. And Ethiopia is a big country. It's a big country. And besides, Abiy Ahmed is an OPDO. Do you think they give a damn about Ethiopia? I don't think so. Abiy Ahmed, Menelik made the first ruler to make this shrewd calculation and also implemented was Menelik. When Menelik signed the Wuchale Treaty, and when Menelik decided to go to war with the Italians, the reason was a dispute over a particular interpretation of Article 17 of the treaty. But nobody asks about what the treaty was and why the treaty even was signed at all. What Article 1 and Article 3 say? Menelik gave Italy a colony, the Eritrean colony, beyond the Maurer River. The fight is about the sovereignty of Ethiopia sub-Maurer River. The reason is because there was a fight over the crown, and the successors were Johannes's son, the presumptive successor. So to do that, to prevent this, he had to what? Marginalize the Tigrans, divide the Tigrans. There was only one Tigray, one Tigrinya speaking people. Okay? Before Wuchale. The Tigrinya speaking people. The past 2 days I was reading two wonderful books by a Jewish historian, Mordecai Aber. Wonderful book. Two wonderful books. One is on the Red Sea, and one is on the era of the princes. And he talks about the Tigrayan, the problem of Tigrayan separatism. He traces that history from way back in 15th century. Okay. So there was only one Tigrayan speaking people. The Eritreans. Donald Levine, my mentor, the late Donald Levine used to say, I'm not trying to use this in a way to deprecate the dignity of the Eritreans, but just to say that that we were one people. The Eritreans, the people that call themselves after their colonial master, after the name that their colonial masters gave them. They give them a name and they stuck with that, all right? But before that, they were Tigray. That was their name, after the language that they speak, all right? So after Menelik is Abiy. That has, in effect, turned Tigray into a buffer zone between Shoa and Eritrea. So his enemy now he's scared of Sha'biya, like Tzadkan is. Now the two people that are scared of Sha'biya are Tzadkan and Abiy. The buffer zone between Addis Ababa and Asmara is Tigray. So Abiy is comfortable ruling Ethiopia, and whatever is left of Ethiopia. He doesn't care. By the way, I'll tell you. Did you see? I was researching into the history of the drafting of the charter, the transitional charter, and nobody talks about it. And I have always wondered, and it has always intrigued me. The history of the charter starts with every book that you pick that's written about that period of Ethiopia. It will start with what? With the July conference, and the conference ended by what? By adopting the charter. The question is, who the damn wrote, who the damn drafted the document? Lencho, now there is a biography, a newly released biography of Lencho. And my friends, two friends of mine in Canada, they scanned I asked them to scan the chapter where
Is that autobiography or biography? I thought it was. All right. All right.
So they sent me the scanned sections of that part of the history. And sadly, I have learned that I learned that a mini conference in preparation for the big conference, the July conference on peace and democracy in Addis, took place in Sanaa, Eritrea, sponsored by Isaias. And it was a meeting between Lencho Letta of OLF and Meles Zenawi, who flew by helicopter. And Isaias was flanked by two PhD lawyers. But Meles, I called Barakat after Selassie, and I asked him to verify who were with Meles, who did he come with to the meeting. He came with a certain assistant of his, who also doubled down as his driver. But Isaias was flanked by two PhDs, Dr. Barakat Habtaselassie and Dr. Amara Takhla. And at the end of the 4-day, at the end of the 4-day meeting, they reached an agreement, a tripartite agreement between OLF, EPLF, and PLF. And that political agreement had to be drafted in legalese, in a legal form. And Isaias called the two lawyers, Barakat Habtaselassie and Amara Takhla, and told them, turn this into a legal document. Then they worked on that document overnight. And on the morning, it was tabled for their signature, and they took one copy to Addis and Khartoum. Lencho came from Khartoum. And Lencho regretted not bringing his Sudanese lawyer friend, Taha. He said, Taha couldn't make it from London. And I really, I was at a disadvantage by not bringing a lawyer with me to help me understand the entire negotiation. But Lencho was successful. The right to self-determination was made a part of the charter because of him. Right? This was the side.
No, that's a fascinating nugget of insider information, I might say. I don't know how our viewers would react to that, but I find it fascinating. But well, I think you gave me a good segue to the second part of our discussion about the constitution. You have studied the Ethiopian constitution. You have written a lot about it. You have proposed things that should be improved, and you have a lot of views about that. And that is one of the things that I want to talk with you about today, because as you will know, Alemayehu, discussions about Ethiopian politics invariably end up being discussions about the constitution. People say that the constitution is fundamentally flawed and that it should be amended. It shouldn't have article for secession and a lot of other things. But the issue that I want to talk to you about today is one of term limits and presidential systems and parliamentary systems, because that is something that I have thought a lot about. And coincidentally, it is also something that Abiy Ahmed is thinking a lot about, because apparently he's trying to change the constitution from what it is today to one that allows for a presidential system. So tell us in detail about what is happening there.
Yeah. So Abiy is set on crowning himself an emperor, as he said his mommy, as his mother prophesied that he would be one, the seventh, except that she was wrong in the numbering. But the thing is, it's very archaic. So he knows that he cannot be a monarch in this day. So the one thing he can be is just an imperial president, something closer to his ideal of a monarch, the absolute monarch. So he commissions a lot of studies. The first study was conducted by an outfit. There is this research outfit within the Prime Minister's office. They call that the policy study something.
That policy institute you have in
Yes.
mind. Yeah.
So
I think it's a department in the Foreign Affairs office, right?
No. This one is within the Prime Minister's office.
All
that
right,
other
all
one is
right.
the Foreign Affairs. That was Kunfa Abrahas. That was a different one.
All right.
Yeah. So that institute came out with a study. What they say is the document. The document is available on online, and what they say is they conducted surveys. I don't know how represented that survey is, but they are saying it is, and they have just objective findings, and the findings indicate that, according to them, most Ethiopians prefer a presidential system to the existing parliamentary system. But this all is just giving the would-be the wannabe monarch.
Yeah, it's more like confirmation bias they're doing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, as if that study and that findings by that body is not enough, the National Dialogue Commission is also tasked with the same task of coming up with a report based on its extensive dialogue that it holds with various sectors of the Ethiopian people. So I remember watching this video of this video on YouTube of the commissioner of the Dialogue Commission, Professor Masfin taking his time. The professor that he is, he just gave like an hour into something presentation about the work that the Dialogue Commission did over the year, and at the end he opened the floor for discussion. And I remember, like, Abiy was the first person to raise his hand and to speak. And the point was, he was saying, no, this is not a Q&A session. He was blocking the audience from having the opportunity to ask questions to the good professor. He said, like, no, this is not a Q&A session. And this is a session for the commission to report back to us. And you have done a fantastic work with the commitment of
so Abiy didn't want people to ask questions to the commissioner. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
That was a very interesting observation. And so he rebuked the commissioner for not coming up with a recommendation in prescribable form. Like he told him, like, as an amendment in a legal, like a proposal for constitutional amendment. Right? Article this, all right? Presidential system. And this the term for a prime minister. So Abiy doesn't care. So he's using, so he had that study. Now he has the dialogue commission, which is going to recommend this. This year, the commission will come up with, definitely with a proposal for those things. A term limit for the prime minister and converting the system into a presidential one. Now, why does he care about a limit, a term limit on the prime minister? Well, he's engaging in theatrics, you know. And he did even at that event, like in Ethiopia. Ethiopia is the only country in Africa that's pushing for a term limit, while the trend in Africa is
to abolish term
to
limits.
abolish term limits. Right? There is a trend that we call third termism. So he's engaged in this kind of theatrics, okay? The term limit, if it's placed and if it pans out as planned, well, this is gonna be his second term, all right? There will be a term limit on it, two terms. That will be the end. But there is also this other amendment, which is making the system presidential. Then Abiy is gonna appear. He's gonna make a debut in the Ethiopian political landscape in a different form, which is as a president, because he's zeroing his term as a president, right? So he will start what? That the next, after 5 years, it will be like his first term as a president. So he's zeroing his terms, right? That's it. So do we really need to get?
Yeah. I think one area where I need clarification, because I have read the essay you have written about that. And one thing that I didn't quite understand is, why would introducing term limit be in Abiy's interest? Because now he has a system, parliamentarian system, with a weak political system, with no opposition, and that means that he could continue being prime minister for as long as he wants, really. One doesn't see any horizon where he might be challenged, and there is no term limit to contend with. So this is the ideal arrangement for Abiy, one would think.
Yeah.
So why would it be in Abiy's interest to introduce term limits now? I'm aware that he could always fiddle around the edge and change things, and even though there are term limits as a president, he could always find a way to extend on to cheat the system and all that. So, but why introduce that trouble into the system in the first place?
That's a good question, Tarek. So both work to his advantage, okay? Whether it's presidential, whether he's a prime minister, both work to his advantage. But he's engaged in theatrics, and what exactly he's doing is that he's creating a plausible deniability, because Abiy came to power on the promise of democratizing Ethiopia. So he's under so much pressure, and he believes that people are still, like, even the international community, you know, the promise that he gave when he came to power in April 2018 is that he'll be democratized, expanding the democratic space. He'll be expanding the democratic space, and so on.
Which was why he was lauded as a liberal reformer, right, by the international media. Yeah.
That's why the Western powers threw their full force behind him. The international, the Bretton Woods institutions are showering him with money. That he's liberalizing the market, the economy, not only the So he's expected to liberalize not only the market but also the politics. So he's engaged in that. He's engaged in that drama. He's not going to democratize Ethiopia, but he's going to create the optics that he is, right? So he sets up this commission, he sets up that commission, right? He's trying to solve Ethiopia's problems created by this evil TPLF Had it not been for them, he wouldn't have been in this position. He wouldn't have been to be dealing with this kind of problem. So he's creating that plausible deniability. If he doesn't change anything in the constitution, if he doesn't bring about constitutional reform, then it's because why? Because they wouldn't allow him to do. He wanted to do that, but they wouldn't. Even the commission, even the dialogue commission, is not doing its job. He wants to shift the blame to. Then he will continue to be a third-term prime minister. There is no limit, thanks to the non-existence of term limits. And by the way, it is unnatural for a prime minister to have term limits. In Hungary, the Fidesz party lost, and with it, the long-serving populist leader, also lost, is gone. Now they are discussing bringing term limits to the prime minister. Well, it's a good discussion. It's constructive, you know. At least you can change people, you know. You can change people within the same party. Maybe, who knows? It can work for better. Who knows? For instance, if it was
sorry to interject, but sorry to cut you off, but wouldn't that be against the spirit of what a parliamentary system is supposed to be? Because
yes.
in a parliamentary system, the party that had the majority and that has the confidence of the parliament gets us to elect the prime minister, and as long as the prime minister has the confidence of the parliament, then he should be allowed to continue being prime minister. And to change that would be to undermine the foundational, the philosophical idea behind the system, right?
Yes. So the tenor. So in a parliamentary system, the tenor of the prime minister is tied to the term of the parliament. So the party that commands the majority seats in parliament chooses the prime minister, and the prime minister remains in that post for as long as he commands the confidence of the majority in the parliament, of his party in the parliament. So even if there is no explicit article clause in our constitution about a vote of no confidence and stuff, parliamentarians can vote to remove the prime minister from office. I mean, there is no prohibition on them. He's accountable to parliament. He's accountable to parliament. He reports to parliament. All right. So the problem is you are not expected to vote in a non-partisan line. You enter parliament as Prosperity Party, then you vote as Prosperity Party. You enter parliament as EPRF, then you are EPRF. That's it. So that's the problem. But in the West, in the advanced democracies in the West that follow the parliamentary system, the prime minister gets voted out when he or she loses the confidence of parliament. That happened to Angela Merkel. That happened to so in those in Westminster. So it's unnatural for parliamentary systems to impose term limits. But here it's just a game. He's just playing a game.
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to remember the things from my civic education. I think the one of them was that an MP is accountable to his constituency, to the law, and to his exactly. So what you are saying is that is not what is happening in Ethiopia.
That's not what's happening in Ethiopia. So there is no problem with the constitution.
And you can't legislate for that, for people behaving in dishonest ways. Yeah.
Yeah. So the problem is what? The problem is what? The only way to correct this design defect is by what? Changing the electoral system. What's defective is the electoral system. A lot of things weren't properly thought out during the drafting of the constitution. No, I don't think the leaders at that time understood the constitution very well. I mean,
Well, so the sense I got from your essay was that they designed the constitution with the assumption that that you have the right people and the right MPs and all that, and that people will behave in certain predictable ways, and that is what is embedded as a foundation of the constitution, and that if you don't have that, if you have MPs behaving in corrupt and disingenuous ways, then there is nothing you could do. The constitution in a way fails, right? That is what you're saying, yeah. But go on.
Yeah. So the constitution enshrines the single member plurality voting system. That's the first past the post system, which means that the party that gets the highest number of seats forms the government. So it's a winner take all. Let's say Prosperity Party gets like 51% of the votes, and another party, let's say Izema, gets 41% of the votes. Yeah. 49% of the votes. Then Izema is not gonna get a single seat. Even if it gets like 41% of the total votes, that's millions. So millions of votes are going to waste. So, and in a divided society like Ethiopia, along ethnic lines, religious lines, political, ideological, representation in parliament is so important that you don't want to see those votes going to waste. So if you want to have those votes that would otherwise have gone to waste to be translated into seats, parliamentary seats, proportionately, is to have a proportional representation, a PR system. So you need to get rid of the first past the post system, and
we'll get to that, Alemayehu. We'll get to that, but first I would like to ask you, what is the defense for winner takes all system? What are its virtues?
Okay, a single member winner takes all system. What are the advantages? It gives
why does it exist as a system? Because it's not just in Ethiopia. It's not just in Ethiopia. Like in the UK, a lot of other countries, they have
the greatest virtue of a winner take all system is it gives you a stable government. A stable government is that you don't have to worry about losing support from the other parties. For instance, you might be forced to form a coalition government because you don't command the majority vote in the majority seats in parliament. Then you have to enter into negotiations with another smaller, less significant party. Then you form a government. When you lose that support, there needs to be conducted another election, and that's expensive for a poor country like Ethiopia. So in terms of efficiency, in terms of stability, it gives you a stable government. All right, that's the advantage. The disadvantage, and its vice, its greatest vice, is the premium, the majority premium, like the things that we were talking about earlier, the votes that get wasted. All right, and the way you dominate parliament with just insignificant, with an insignificant margin. Right? You just have a marginal advantage over the other party. Right? It's 50% plus one, yeah, to make content. Even here, you don't even have to be a 50%, by the way, in a plurality system. You just have the highest number.
Yeah.
Just by one person, one guy, one person has
Yeah,
voted.
it suffices. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so that insignificant advantage turns into what? A devastating dominance in parliament. So that's the defect.
Yeah. So it's inherently unfair. Yeah.
It's inherently unfair. Inherently unfair. So added to this, so the lower house of parliament is filled by this system. All right. There is a single member district in the country, and you conduct that election, and the party that they go in. Yeah? But the upper chamber follows a different mechanism. State councils or the people. Look, the upper chamber represents.
By the upper chamber, you mean the House of Federation, right? You mean the House of Federation?
Yes, the House of Federation.
Just so everybody knows. Yeah.
So the two houses represent different sections of the people. The House of People's Representatives represents the people as individuals, not as groups. So Ethiopians are represented in the lower house of parliament, in the House of Reps, as Ethiopians, not as a Tigrayan, not as an Oromo, not as an Orthodox Christian, or not a Catholic now. As Teglai or as Alemayehu. That's how you are represented, right? Then, in the upper chamber, in the House of Federation, it is the nation's nationalities and peoples that are represented. So each ethnic group has one representative. All right, let's say we have 80 ethnic groups. There are 80 seats representing each ethnic group. But for every extra 1 million, there is one more seat. So let's say the Oromo are how many? Let's say they are 46 million. Let's say. So first they get one seat as an
ethnic
group, as a collective. Yeah. Then they get 45 more seats for each additional 1 million Oromo. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So look, the lower chamber is already a majoritarian institution. You are duplicating the same thing in the
problems
upper
chamber. In the lower chamber are replicated.
The upper chamber was supposed to be a counter-majoritarian institution, not a majoritarian institution. So in Ethiopia, I don't understand why the framers did this. In America, you have the Senate. The smallest state has an equal representation with the largest state in the Senate, because the Senate is meant to be a counter-majoritarian institution. It's supposed to work that way. It's supposed to check the House, not to duplicate the representation in the lower house. Now, you were asking me in one of our correspondence about why Tigray is a permanent minority. This is the design that made Tigray a permanent minority. It's not just Tigray, but every minority is a permanent minority. All right? Even there are minorities within minorities. Yeah. In Amhara, for instance, if you go to Amhara, there are those small ethnic groups within Amhara, yeah? Like the Ago, the Command, stuff like that.
Meaning, if the Tigrayan government, for instance, made an appeal to the House of Federation, it would always be at a disadvantage because of the way
exactly.
The representation.
So the constitutional issue was raised, yeah, that led us to the war, it was decided by the House of Federation. The design defect. The House of Federation was sitting as a judge in a case that concerns itself. That's a great injustice. You cannot be a judge in your own case. This is a simple legal dictum. One cannot be a judge in his own case. But the House of Federation, in a matter that concerns the term of the various government agencies, the parliament is an agency of the government. That's the lawmaking body, one of the three branches of government. So the matter was referred to it by the lower house, okay, to see whether the proposal to extend the terms of the bodies of government indefinitely until such time that it was declared safe to conduct elections was constitutional. Then it entertained the case. It should have recused itself from considering that. But the Constitution says it is the constitutional arbiter. It's the umpire. In the draft Constitution, it was changed by PRDF delegates, by the way, later. In the draft Constitution, what we now call in the Constitution, the Council of Constitutional Inquiry, which has only an advisory role to the House, and it's staffed with the legal expertise, was supposed to be a full-fledged constitutional court, just like Austria or Germany. Right. There are two models to constitutional interpretation. That's the American model. That's the decentralized model. The courts, the ordinary courts, interpret the Constitution. They have the final say. And the Supreme Court is the highest court, and it has. But in the Austrian, thanks to Hans Kelsen, it was the legal philosopher that drafted their constitution. He's also the father of the constitutional court, an independent constitutional court they established, and that's the body that does. So this body, the inquiry, the Council of Constitutional Inquiry, was supposed to be a full-fledged constitutional court. It was just judges, okay, people with law degrees. Hired on their merits, right? Not political operatives, not politicians. All right. So this is also another defect in the design of the Constitution.
What interesting that you mentioned the U.S. Constitution, and when you think of the U.S. Constitution, you think of the people who laid the philosophical foundation, like Thomas Paine and other people, and the virtue of liberty, of reason, of rationality, and these ideas were embedded in the Constitution. Who were the people who did the thinking when it comes to the Ethiopian Constitution?
You see, that's the reason why I was digging into the history, into the early history of the drafting of the charter, because understanding the charter, you can understand at least half of the Constitution, because much of the most important provisions of the Constitution are carried over from the charter, like the right to self-determination, Article 39 stuff. They were just copied from the charter.
From the charter, yeah.
So who did that? Lencho, Meles Zenawi, and Isaias Afwerki. Lencho of OLF was kicked out. They withdrew from the transitional government. So they didn't even stay until the drafting of the Constitution, because the Constitution was drafted in 1994 and adopted in 1995. But they left sometime in 1993, late 1993. So, but they were part of the charter, the three of them, all right? So Lencho, OLF left, Eritrea seceded. So who stayed? That's the TPLF. So the charter was the work of the TPLF, you can say. But did TPLF understand what it did? Do they understand now, the people at the helm of the TPLF? Do they understand what the constitution, what the constitution is, the constitution that they would die for? Meles went there with a driver. With a driver.
Yes, I mean it's fascinating you say that, because there is one point that Isaias always complains about when it comes to Ethiopia. He always says in interviews that Meles had sent him a draft of the constitution, and that Isaias sent back his feedback. And one of the things that, according to Isaias telling, Isaias said that this whole thing of centering everything around ethnicity would not be a good idea, and that shouldn't be the basis on which the constitution is framed, and that Meles ignored and went ahead with the initial draft anyway. Do you think that story of Isaias has any credibility? Do you think it is something that happened?
I would say it's credible. It's credible, and I say it's credible because Lynch Oleta has been writing about this for a long time, and he was there. He was at Sana'a. Lynch was there, and according to Lynch, now the thing that I have to take with a pinch of salt is Lynch's testimony about his role. Maybe he is kind of attributing to himself a larger than life contribution. He says like he drove from Khartoum to Sana'a and he went there with a draft of the charter. I don't believe he had a draft of the charter, but he had some ideas as to what needs to be incorporated in the charter. And I talked to Barakhat, and Barakhat said like, well, it was kind of, I don't know. Meles had a head full of ideas. That's what he said, word for word. Meles had, but Lynch said it was his idea. Meles had a head full of ideas. So the thing that I take with a pinch of salt is Lynch's testimony as about his role. He might be exaggerating the stuff, but his testimony about Isaias is consistent, and I find it to be credible.
So if you were, with all your
and by the way, Isaias' objection is not about. I don't think it emanates from out of his care for Ethiopia or stuff like that.
I think there is an element of revisionism.
The example it sets for Eritrea. He doesn't want. Yeah, Eritrea is also multi-ethnic.
He doesn't want the recognition of of people's right to self-administration and all that, because that is anathema to the whole thing.
Yes,
Eritrea is. So that is his beef. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yes. So of course there is an element of revisionism in his telling of the story, but like you said, maybe there is an element of truth,
self-interest
as well. Exactly. Yes, but I was going to ask you, with all your expertise now in constitutional drafting and all that, if you are writing the constitution today, what would the main what would you change in short?
Honestly, that's a tall order. It's maybe you are asking me to.
Broadly speaking, So obviously, one thing you would change, for instance, would be you wouldn't.
I would start with one thing, and it's going to be very unpopular among ethno-nationalists. And the one thing that's fueling conflict and mistrust in Ethiopia is the right of secession. Do you know why? Do you know why the Amhara, Fano fought Tigray alongside the federal government? Because they were told that Tigray is taking your land. Tigray is seceding. That's what TPLF is doing. That has been TPLF's agenda since its inception. And they are taking your land. They fought. Don't you think that that's the reason why the federal government doesn't want to restore Western Tigray to Tigray, as per the Pretoria Agreement? Because that's the intent. That's the price they got for participating in the war. All right? I mean, forget the fallout that followed the agreement. So the first thing is, I would just take out the cessation clause out of the Article 39. I would leave the self-determination part.
Well, but wouldn't that, because I mean, I would leave the legal argument.
And the reason is, now with the benefit of hindsight, whether or not you want to secede, what history has taught us is you cannot secede. And what is the point of a parchment right, a paper right, a right only good on paper that you cannot exercise? Had Tigray invoked Article 39, its right to secession, do you think the House of Federation would organize a referendum in Tigray for secession? No. So what's the point of keeping that right on parchment?
Well, the point of that would be that if you acknowledge that a given people has the right to self-determination, then you shouldn't put a cap to how far the people might want to take that right.
But that's fueling mistrust, because we don't have like a cleanly delineated like territories. When you are like matching like ethnicity, ethno-nationalism with territorialization, yeah, you cannot detach ethnicity from land. So the dispute over land is, I mean, this dispute over identity is a dispute over land. They are not separate. But Ethiopia has not been like that. You don't have this cleanly delineated territory for ethnicities in Ethiopia. So if you agree as Ethiopians, I mean, if you agree, I don't think administrative boundaries are going to be a big problem. If you can live, if people can move, reside anywhere, any part of the country, choose their livelihood, whatever way they want, whether they want to farm or whether they want to trade, right? I don't see any problem. I don't see any problem in that.
No, I hear you.
Determination. You choose your own people to. That's self-determination. You know, exercise rule, self-rule. I think that's the most fundamental right to me. Yeah. But secession is just fueling mistrust.
Well, I hear you, but wouldn't you be introducing other problems? So, for instance, now, especially among Tigrayans who had fought in the war, they would say that the reason their friends sacrificed their lives and the reason they were ready to sacrifice their own lives was because they wanted Tigray to become independent.
But nobody told us that they really want. That was the war about. That's we are just.
Yes, even though they would say the TPLF lied about it, but that anyway, that is the reason why they felt compelled to fight. That deep down, the
TPLF has been clear from the very outset. It's just a mischaracterization by other folks that the TPLF has been a secessionist movement. It wasn't.
No, but nobody would say that now.
Yes. It wasn't at all. Lencho has written about this extensively, like during his career. If you read his published articles, his books, the difference between the OLF and the TPLF was that while the Eritreans had the colonial thesis, and they had a secessionist agenda. The TPLF never had a secessionist agenda, but OLF had a secessionist agenda. What the TPLF wanted was to work within the Ethiopian state in a modus vivendi that allows for self-rule, autonomy of some sort. So it's really a wrong characterization. So Hagar Tigray and stuff is something the TPLF engages in as a rhetoric to mobilize the youth. To mobilize the youth. That's where you hit the wall. You get in trouble when you are demanding secession. When you get to that, no, the TPLF they want that's not the party. It's not a secessionist party. It's a false promise, and a promise not not made in clear terms. They are ambiguous about that when it comes to mobilizing the youth.
Yeah. I mean, this whole notion about independence, but when said by the TPLF that it is a shtick to mobilize the people, I think it is something that people, especially people in Tigray, have woken up to. So there is nobody now in Tigray who believes that the TPLF really wants independence, right? And the only people who accuse the TPLF of harboring secessionist agenda are people who have agenda against the TPLF for various nefarious reasons, I would say. Yeah. I don't think there is any good faith, a person arguing in good faith who would say that the TPLF wants to make Tigray a country, or they want to secede, and all that. So I completely agree with you. But what I am saying is that there are a lot of people now in Tigray and in Oromia as well, I would say, especially people in the OLA and all that, who say that the reason they have been fighting for a long time is because they want to push for independence, which they recognize as a constitutional right. So my point would be that if you were to push for a constitution that excludes that right, wouldn't it be angering a lot of people? That was my point.
If the Ethiopian state has been insistent on not allowing any group to secede. So whether or not that right is put on the parchment, on the constitution, if you are going to secede, you have to fight a war. Not only you have to fight a war, you have to be successful at the end. So it's like John Locke, there is Locke's in his second treatise on civil government, he says there is a right of revolution in the Commonwealth. And that right of revolution is for people to rise up in arms when they deem that their rights are being systematically and grossly abused. You can rise you have a right to revolution. So secession is like that. It's a moral right. It's not a right that you have to include in a constitution. Yeah, you cannot say in a constitution the people have a right to rebel. Yeah, for instance, what's the difference between the American Declaration of Independence that we are going to celebrate its 250th year this July, and the U.S. Constitution? The Declaration of Independence is the document that consecrates the Lockean right of revolution. They list the 13 colonists' grievances against the British colonial rule. What the king did, this and that and that. Then they declare their right and they rise up. All right, but in the constitution, you cannot incorporate that right, because a constitution is an instrument of governance by peaceful means, not by revolution, or not by. I mean, the constitution was an outcome of a revolution, but the constitution cannot enshrine revolution as a right. So secession is something like that, something equivalent to that. It's a moral right, When a group or a state within the federation feels that its rights are being abridged, then you rise up, you fight the war. But don't expect the framers of the constitution to enshrine that in the constitution. It doesn't help. We saw that. History told us it doesn't help. The Amhara wouldn't be fighting alongside the federal government if they weren't told that Tigray is taking their land.
So a moral right could exist outside
Yeah,
the
exactly.
framework of a constitution.
Yeah.
I see the point. I see the point. So that is one change you would make.
Definitely
I know
do
that.
that. Definitely do
Yeah,
that.
I know that I'm putting you on the spot, and it's not fair. But I mean, in broad outlines, you don't have to be very, very specific. And the reason I'm asking you these questions is because I feel like something has to give when it comes to Ethiopia and the constitution, because the whole edifice appears to me to be standing on a faulty foundation, and one of the foundations is the constitution. And I feel as though people should talk and discuss how the foundation could be changed. And there is no better person than you to contemplate on these matters, on what could be changed. So that is one thing. Article 39, I'm sure that's going to rile up a lot of our listeners. I know that. But what else would you mull over?
I would divest the House of Federation of its power to interpret the Constitution and give it to the Council of Constitutional Inquiry and elevate it to a full-fledged constitutional court, as it was originally intended. I believe judges are better equipped, better qualified than politicians to say what the Constitution is. What does Agnew Teshagir know about the Constitution?
Is it the head of the House of Federation today? Yeah. It's a joke. Yeah.
It's a joke. Yeah. I mean, at least I would trust a law graduate, right, as a judge in the constitutional court to interpret the Constitution.
So this would be.
Yeah. By the way, in America, for instance, there is this fascinating history about judicial review. Yeah. Nowhere in the Constitution, in the text of the U.S. Constitution, is judicial review mentioned. Not only that, it's not mentioned, but nowhere in the Constitution is the power to interpret the Constitution given to the American Supreme Court. It was in a case in 1803, in a case between it's called Marbury versus Madison, and it was the Chief Justice John Marshall that took up, he just the genius of Marshall, but there was a dispute between Jefferson and Adams. Jefferson was coming in as a new president, as a newly elected president, and Adams was leaving. What John Adams did was, they wanted, there is this thing that we call the lame duck Congress. That before you leave office, you try to pass as many legislation as you can. You want to give commissions and appointments as many as you can before you leave office. So he gave commissions to judges. They are called the peace judge in Washington D.C. And one of them, he didn't receive the commission by midnight. That's when the day changed. Yeah, the new president comes in, and by midnight, that judge didn't receive the commission, and it was It was Madison. James Madison was the Secretary of State, and it was a job of the Secretary of State to affix the stamp and give the judge that was appointed by President Adams. So when he didn't receive, he sued in the Supreme Court. Then Marshall declared he didn't decide on the merit of the case. You know what? You know why he didn't? That's the genius. To hand down a judgment that cannot be enforced is a bad precedent. You make people lose faith in the law. So he didn't want to decide to force the incoming president, to force the president's new secretary, to give the commission to the judges appointed by the past president just yesterday. Yeah? So instead, what he did was he declared the power of the court to interpret the Constitution. So the question he framed was like, does this court has power to entertain this case first, to interpret the Constitution? It is the proper province of the Constitution, and of the judges, of the justices, to interpret the Constitution. And say like our job, and then it's just fascinating. So geniuses like Marshall created institutions like judicial review, the power to interpret. They gave the power to interpret the Constitution to the ordinary courts. Geniuses like Hans Kelsen in Austria, who drafted the Austrian Constitution, created the independent constitutional court. Now we don't need geniuses. All we need to do is just open our eyes and learn from those places what's best for Ethiopia. So I believe the constitutional court would serve Ethiopia great.
Well, thank you very much, Alemayehu. That was a fascinating conversation. I think we covered a lot of ground. I think these conversations are very useful because, as you know, the political discourse in Ethiopia, for the most part, is an exercise in, at best, tinkering on the edges, at worst, just going in circles. People are not discussing new ideas and all that. And I believe that the only way we could change things in a fundamental way is by talking about what it is that we could change at a fundamental level. And the Constitution is one candidate for that discussion. People should talk about what it is that we could change about the Constitution, and that is the reason why I wanted you to come on and take us through the basic assumptions embedded in the Constitution and which ones of them are problematic and what can we change and how and all that. And this is something that I would want us to continue because today was only on we only scratched the surface, I suppose. There is more to talk about. But thank you very much for your lucid analysis and exposition of the Constitution, Alemayehu. I really, really appreciate that.
Thank you, Takhlai. The pleasure was actually mine. And if I appear like a professor, then
well, you appear like a mad professor, which I like. You appear like a mad professor.
So I missed the classroom, so that's why I have been in Maqala.
The only thing missing from a profile of a mad professor is you are not smoking, thankfully. But otherwise, well, thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
All right.